Okay, I think that might be everybody. Um, so can everybody hear me? If you could just put something in the chat if you can, just to make sure um, before I get started, and then I'm not speaking to myself, just in case. Yes, cool. Okay, thank you. Right, we'll get going. So thank you for joining me. I've got myself and Mel and Steph with us on the call as well. So if you need anything during the webinar, then just drop it into chat and we'll help you. This is going to be a really short and punchy session, so no more than about half an hour. The video that we've got to show you is just 10 minutes. So it's an awful lot of information, but in a very short amount of time. And then we're going to have about 20 minutes worth of questions at the end, depending on how many questions that you do have. If you want to ask a question now or during the webinar in terms of when the video is on or at the end, you should be able to see a little Q&A function just at the top of your screen. So if you want to put your questions in there and we can look at them and answer them at the end. This webinar is for those that work in the engineering department. So if you're a techie, you're very welcome, but this isn't designed for you, if you could just bear that in mind. So if you're an engineer or a planner, engineering manager, admin, anything like that to do with the engineering function, this webinar is for you. I have had a few emails from different people asking why they've been invited to this. I think it might have been your technical team that's invited you. And maybe not haven't communicated that to you. But it will all become clear when you watch the webinar. There are changes in issue 9 that impact the engineering department specifically, so it's really important that you're here. So thank you for joining us. And I think with that, I shall pass you on to the video and I'll speak to you afterwards. Welcome to an overview of the changes in Issue 9 for engineers. This webinar is designed for engineers who want an overview of the changes in BRCGS food safety from Issue 8 to Issue 9. Full transparency before we start. We are not affiliated to BRCGS in any way, and we are not a BRCGS approved training provider. This is because we've chosen not to be, as we don't want to have to stick to the curriculum provided by BRCGS, as we believe that this prevents the training from being actionable. We're also not going to be able to go through every change in the standard during this webinar, as that would take too long. What we will do is highlight to you the key points of the standard that you need to focus on ready for your next audit. To enable this, we've gone through the standard and the interpretation guide for both Issue 8 and Issue 9 and compared them line by line. We've not used the BRCGS Key Changes document for this, as we know that this doesn't call out all the important changes to the level of detail that we would need. This webinar will explain some of the outputs of that piece of work. We won't be showing you extracts from the standard, as BRCGS wouldn't allow us to do this for copyright reasons. And you'll probably know by now that we like to do things our way, as we like to make it simple and easy to understand. Okay, with that being said, let's crack on. Key dates. The new standard was published on the 1st of August and will be audited from the 1st of February 2023. Therefore, if you have your audit on or from the 1st of February, you'll be audited to Issue 9. The changes. BRC have called out a number of changes within the standard, but not all of them will impact you in engineering. We're just going to go through the changes that impact you, which are culture, equipment, and maintenance. Culture. Culture was introduced into the BRCGS standard in Issue 8, and the requirements to it have been strengthened for Issue 9. As a member of the engineering team, it's possible that you've not heard of culture before, so let's just go over some background before we get into the detail of the changes. What is culture? This is a huge topic, but very simply put, culture is a set of beliefs, attitudes, and expectations. When applied to a business, it's like the personality that the business chooses to have. What's important to the business, what it wants to achieve, and the impacts that it wants to have. Defining the culture of a business allows the management team to then identify how they want their employees to behave. What this means to your business. This means that your business for Issue 8 had to define what culture it wanted. It then had to establish if the employees within your business felt it was achieving the defined culture. And where there was a difference between what it wanted to achieve and what the employees in the business thought, this would then create an action plan for improvement. What this means now. 3 years on, this means that your business should already have a culture plan in place, and your management team should be reviewing it regularly to keep adding improvement actions. For Issue 9, there are a few additions to the requirements. They're only small, but the impact of them is going to be huge, so you need to know what they are, as they'll affect you personally and your department. The changes in culture. The changes in Issue 9 for culture are that your business must define how it wants its employees to behave. The senior team must review culture annually. At least one of the senior team must present culture at the audit. And culture is referenced throughout the standard. Let's now look at what that means as a whole, and specifically what it means to you in engineering. What the changes mean. The easiest way to understand the changes is to compare how audits typically used to be managed to how they need to be managed in the future. Compliance to the standard and running an audit has always been a technical job. However, what the standard is looking for with these culture changes is for a change in behaviour with regard to compliance. Compliance and the audit should no longer be seen as something that technical looks after, but instead it must now be a team effort. One of the changes was that at least one of the senior team must present culture at the audit. The reason that BRCGS want this to happen is that they want to see that your business is sharing the responsibility of the audit, that the whole of the senior team is accountable for compliance to the standard. In theory, this means that the most senior person on site must present senior management commitment, as this is their area of accountability. The operations lead will need to present their part. Procurement will need to present supplier management, and so on. As a member of the engineering team, you need to be prepared to present your area of accountability, which is the equipment and maintenance sections of the standard. This means that you need to understand what's required to comply with the standard for these sections, and what the changes are within Issue 9 that impact you. Equipment. For Issue 9, the equipment section has been totally rewritten, which means there are a lot of changes. There's too many of them to go through during this webinar, but here are the highlights. New equipment must be purchased based on an agreed specification. A risk assessment must be completed for all product contact materials, which determines the controls needed. A procedure is now needed for commissioning of new equipment, and controls are needed for moving equipment that's not normally moved, not in use equipment, mobile equipment, and equipment that needs to be charged. Maintenance. A review is now needed following repairs to establish if the planned preventive maintenance system needs improvement. This is because a repair is seen as a failure in the planned preventive maintenance system. So you now need to be able to track repairs, trend them, and then review them to establish if improvement actions need to be applied. What this means to you. As a member of the engineering team or the engineering lead for your business, it's now up to you and your team to champion equipment controls and maintenance for your site. This means that you should be accountable for the procedure that controls equipment and maintenance, and you're responsible for its implementation. Your next steps. The thought of leading the delivery of the equipment and maintenance sections at your next BRCGS audit is probably a bit of a daunting task, if you've not been responsible for it before. To enable you to do this and to present it confidently at audit, you're going to need to understand the requirements of the standard for these subjects in detail. To do this, we would recommend that you complete our Issue 9 for Engineers training course. This will take you through the changes to the standard and how to implement them. The training is actionable, so you'll know exactly what you need to do. That way, when it comes to your audit, you'll be able to explain to the auditor the changes to the standard that impact your department and what you've done about them. That's the end of the presentation, so we'll now move on to questions.
Hi, my name's Mel. I'm going to be helping with the questions as well today, if anybody wants to kick things off. You can use your Q&A or you can use the chat, whichever one you fancy.
And while you're doing that, if anybody would like to... can you hear me, Mel?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I had to change my audio settings, that's all. If anybody would put into the chat for me what they thought of the changes in issue 9 that we've just been through, specifically how you feel about the culture aspect and how you would feel as somebody in the engineering department presenting that information to the auditor at your next audit. I'd be really keen to understand what you think.
So Richard Facey has asked you a question, Cassie. Are we required to show root cause analysis or breakdown analysis reports?
So both. So what you will need to do is be able to provide information to the auditor about the breakdowns that have happened, and they won't be expecting you to do root cause analysis on every single breakdown. It will depend on the type of breakdown that's happened. You're going to have to be a little bit pragmatic about this. Hopefully the auditors will be the same. So if it's a trend of issues that keep happening over and over again, they will expect you to have done root cause analysis on that to determine what's causing that and put it right completely, rather than just putting a sticking plaster over it again and again. Or if it's a really big breakdown that's had a massive impact, then they would expect you to do root cause analysis on that as well. So it depends on the situation, but both really.
So Sharon Cutts would like to know if you can talk her through the requirements for hygienic surface assessment.
Hygienic surface assessment. So is this part of the handback? What was her name, sorry?
Sharon.
Sharon. If you could just pop in the chat if that was anything to do, or is she on the Q&A, Mel?
She's on the Q&A.
Okay. I'll go with the presumption that it's about the handback then. So hygienic, checking the machinery after you've done equipment maintenance and you're putting it back into production. That will totally depend on the equipment itself. Again, you've got to be pragmatic and think about what the risks involved are and what the equipment is being used for. If it's a piece of equipment that's in a high-risk area, then you're going to have to do really thorough verification of that clean before it's put back into production, as you would do normally. If it's a low-risk product, then visual inspection is going to be sufficient. I hope that answers the question that you were asking. If not,
Sharon,
just ask again.
Cassie, Sharon did add to those comments welding and food contact standards.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in our courses, we use an example of a mixing bowl for this. So if you think about if you were mixing a product in a high-risk area, then the mixing bowl, if it was welded, would have to be welded to a standard which makes it completely smooth so that it could be cleaned and disinfected and it was basically sterile. Because any welding where you've got joins or gaps or it's rough, bacteria can get into those little spaces and it means it's very difficult to remove them. And it also, in the worst case, if it was very bad welding, then you could end up with bits sticking out which would get worn off over time. If it was in a low risk area, then again, it would need to be visually smooth rather than microbiologically smooth. So you've just got to bear in mind what piece of equipment it is and whether it's going to touch something. So if it's going to touch the product, what's it going to touch, and therefore what kind of risks would be involved in that. That's the standard that you have to apply depends on the situation.
Okay, there's no questions at the moment, so I don't know if there's anything you want to sort of highlight or talk about, Cassie. There's no questions in Q&A or chat at the moment.
Okay. So things to run through then, we can go through a little bit more detail on the equipment side of things. The equipment changes are quite significant, and the changes themselves around the types of equipment that you've got to control. So we've gone through those in terms of mobile equipment, not in use equipment, any equipment where you're going to be charging something. You've got to really think about all the different pieces of equipment that you've got in the factory, and then think about what the risks are to the product from those pieces of equipment. This time around, the standard is very much, the changes in the standard are very much designed to ensure that we're not doing any cross-contamination risks from high risk to high care to low care and so on. So you've got to think about, if you've got your different zones in the factory, that you're not moving equipment from outside into an open product area and so on. So make sure that you list all of the equipment that you've got in the factory. You'd need to do that anyway for your planned preventive maintenance system. And part of that process is you then have to risk assess it and make sure that you define what the risks are and what the controls need to be for each piece of equipment. But specifically focus on the ones that they've highlighted in the standard, which are the ones that we've listed in this webinar. The video from this will be issued to you afterwards, so you'll be able to take the information down from the slides.
Richard's asked, is this only, one second, just switch over from Q&A because there's another question coming too. Richard has asked, is this only for new equipment or existing equipment?
Both. So there's a change around new equipment in that you've got to have additional controls for those different pieces of equipment. And then there's also, you need to have a procedure now and a defined process for how you manage new equipment, in that you must have a commissioning procedure if you're implementing new pieces of equipment. And you also must do more verification on the equipment that you're going to put in place before it's put in place, to make sure that it's fit for purpose and it meets all of the requirements. So all of your product contact material assessments, and making sure that you define a really robust specification for that piece of equipment so that it does what you want it to and that it does it safely.
So Sarah Miles has asked, what kind of things would be expected for the documented purchase specification for new equipment?
Okay, so that again depends on the piece of equipment. If we think about something like something simple like a conveyor belt, and you are purchasing a conveyor belt, you would want to have an agreed specification with the manufacturer so that you know how long the conveyor belt's going to be, at what speed it's going to be capable of running at, is it an on and off, does it have sensors so that it will start and stop depending on whether there's product on it and things. What are your expectations in terms of what you're going to be purchasing? That all needs to be documented in a specification. Then you need to think about all of the things that need to happen to that piece of equipment while it's in use. So you would need to think about how we're going to clean it. Are there any contamination risks associated with it? Does it have glass and hard plastic on it? Do we need to check those? And you need to think about all those things before you purchase the piece of equipment so that you can define your expectations for them in that specification, so that when that piece of equipment arrives, it's what you expect it to be and you're not having to retrofit things and fudge things to make it fit. I hope that helps.
I just want to mention as well, I don't know if anyone's aware of our, sure if everyone's aware of our issue 9 for engineers training. All of these subjects are covered in that. we're not here to sell you the issue 9 training. We're here to answer questions and talk about it for the changes, but the training does include all of that, just so that you're aware of it, and I'll stick a link to that in the chat if anybody's interested in having a look. Darren's asked a question. Are there any recommended documents which can be used for commissioning or purchasing so nothing is missed?
So we are actually working on our documents at the moment. So come next week, then yes, we will have all of those. Well, we already have all of those in our maintenance pack at the moment already, but I'm going through it again to make sure that we're meeting all of the requirements for issue 9. So yes, there will be those. I'm not aware of any documents anywhere else that you could get that would do that for you. And I don't think even BRC have anything around maintenance on this subject. On Participate, they do have a lot of guidelines on there that you can normally use, but I don't think they've got anything with regards to commissioning or maintenance, I'm afraid.
Andy Willis has mentioned something. He says on the subject of engineers presenting cultural elements in version 9, he feels that most engineers are comfortable in talking to auditors and should be okay, but that's probably with support from their manager in presenting that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Cassie.
Yeah, I think that's good to hear that you're comfortable with doing that. Definitely it's a team effort, and that's what BRC are trying to get to with issue 9. So it's not that you're going to be there on your own anyway. It is a team effort, so everybody's going to be there doing it together. But you just need to bear in mind that it's not you just presenting information when requested. It's you presenting that information. You're the lead for it rather than the technical person being the lead, and you're just there to answer questions, if that makes sense.
So
It's good to know. Sorry.
Thanks for that comment, Andy. Victoria's asked, how would second-hand equipment requiring internal modifications be dealt with for purchase, specification and commissioning?
So exactly the same way. It's not new, but it's new to you. So you should expect the same from a manufacturer, from the supplier that provides that to you. On the subject of equipment that's already in situ, so part of the changes or improvements, because this was always there, was that you must make sure that anything that comes into contact with the product is fit for purpose and meets the legal requirements, so for chemical migration and that type of thing. So if you've got a piece of equipment that's already in place and you don't know what it's made from and it comes into contact with the product, then you must carry out an assessment of that equipment and the material that comes into contact to determine if you think there's any risks involved in it. Just a bit of a word of warning around this. The standard will allow you to do that, but it does mean that there's going to be a serious conversation over that during audit, which is always something that you don't want. Because it could go either way. You could end up with an auditor that's quite pragmatic about it and accepts what you're saying, or they could be quite black and white and say, no, if you can't provide me with evidence that that's safe, then I'm not having it. If you are in that situation, we do work with a company that can test materials and tell you what they are. So that might be of help. I will speak to them about that, thinking about it now, and see if we can communicate that information in case there's anything that they can help, rather than having to replace big pieces of equipment that are material contact. If you could establish what they were and prove that they were safe, then that's definitely the right way to go. But you will have to document all that, and it's going to have to be robust to get through the audit.
Richard Faces asked another question. Is there a requirement to present up-to-date PUWER reports? I've not heard of that before. Apologies, everybody. On all equipment, new and old.
So PUWER is a health and safety requirement. If you think about that, and then extend it to food safety, quality, authenticity, legality from a product perspective, that's exactly what we're looking for to meet these requirements. The health and safety element of it, the auditor is not going to be interested in. I know that sounds weird because health and safety is number one, but from an auditor's perspective, they're not auditing you to health and safety requirements. It's not part of the standard that they're looking at. So they won't be interested in your pure assessments, but the what's the word? The principle of that is exactly what you need to do from a food safety, quality, legality and authenticity point of view.
I don't have any other questions. One here from Norman. Will these changes increase the length of an audit?
Probably. They always do. At the moment, we don't know the answer to that question, so I'm not aware of any changes in terms of times, but they do normally publish a new calculator after each new issue. So we're expecting that to be updated, but I haven't seen so yet.
I don't have anything for you at the moment, Cassie. I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover or mention.
No, I'm good. Just to say that if anybody comes up with any questions after this and they would like to ask them, please do just email me, or we have a chat function on our website. You're very welcome to chat with me there. I'm happy to help. Okay, and we'll send this out as a video shortly. All right, thanks Mel. Thank you everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.